Good Monday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. A little later in the show, Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for Play Dealer, cleveland.com, will be along. We will take a look back at the regular season, preview the playoff series where the Cavs have home court advantage against the Knicks. We begin by talking a little bit of Browns and back to the courtroom, if you will. Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter, tweets this out. The judge quashes Deshaun Watson's deposition, rescheduled for Monday in Houston. And as we go a little deeper into it, this is the plaintiff that is not represented by Tony Busby, and Watson's legal counsel discredited her, said there was a lot of inconsistencies. They also came out and called this an attempt to make an extortionist shakedown. They said they were not putting up with it, and the days of settling lawsuits that they don't believe in are over. So the bottom line is no new news regarding Deshaun Watson and a potential deposition in Houston. So status quo there. All right, the question becomes, did the Browns overpay to get Deshaun Watson? A guy with a little bit of perspective, Brandon Marshall, former NFL wide receiver for a number of years, on the topic of did the Browns overpay?
It's rare that you ever see a quarterback on the market.
Okay.
You don't give up franchise quarterbacks.
Let's ignore. First of all, he requested a trade out of Houston and sat out until they traded. They forced his hand. But let's ignore that part for a second. He sat out an entire year, and all you had on his resume to gauge his value on was he doesn't have an MVP.
Doesn't matter.
He doesn't have a Super Bowl. He lost, I believe, in the conference championship game against the Kansas City Chiefs, if I'm correct.
Okay.
You're telling me that's a $230 million quarterback that's strictly off potential?
Yes,
he sat out an entire year.
Well, it doesn't matter.
That's crazy.
I'm telling you, as a receiver,
Browns
if he
were
sat
desperate and they overpaid. The Browns were desperate and they overpaid because the Falcons were in the mix.
If Drew Brees,
the Saints were in the mix. The Dolphins were in the mix. They overpaid for him.
If Drew Brees, right now, if I'm active. And I'm playing for the Jets, right? Back in the day, playing for the Jets. And we have no quarterback. We got Zach Wilson as our only option, okay? And Drew Brees comes out and say, hey, I'm coming out of retirement. The 45-year-old Drew Brees, however old he is, he says he's coming out of retirement. I'm going to say give him whatever he wants.
And with that, let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Play Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, that's a wide receiver's perspective of how important the quarterback position is, and he's being completely honest.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to know the value of a quarterback, ask any receiver, what his life is like without having that elite quarterback. And, I mean, I can understand the argument that maybe the Browns overpaid in the sense they gave a fully guaranteed contract, but the reality is, when you have the ability to get a guy, there's always talk of, do whatever it takes to get it done. Well, Andrew Brady basically did whatever it takes to get the deal done because, as we saw, obviously Deshaun Watson, has that elite talent on his resume. Yeah, he didn't win MVP, but if you look at the Houston team around him, he kept losing quality pieces and still performed well. 2020, I've been saying this before that, with the season Deshaun Watson put up, I mean, Houston won 4 games, but if he's not on that team, maybe they win 1. Maybe we're talking about a 1-15, 2-14, maybe even an 0-16 season in 2020, 17, because I think that was the first of the 17 game seasons, if I'm correct. So you look at the talent there, it's a gamble, no question, because you're giving up 3 first-round picks. You're giving Deshaun Watson an unprecedented contract, but it was either that or, trust in Baker Mayfield, and we saw just how, he really has not been able to match what he did in 2020, just isn't the guy anymore. And you'd rather take the chance that Deshaun Watson, after, 2 years of almost not playing, can become the guy at some point early in the contract versus, having to try and find that guy again, because at least with Watson, that there's proven high-level quarterback play within his resume.
Yep, you either have that quality quarterback or you're always looking for it. There really isn't an in-between. This is kind of interesting as well. This is from a Terry Pluto article. Keeps hearing that the Browns were concerned that Kareem Hunt was slipping in terms of his speed. And that would play into the fact that you didn't see him used as much late in the year. Averaged a career low 3.8 yards per carry. PFF ranked him 53rd out of 62 qualifying running backs. At this point, he should be thankful for a one-year deal in the $4 million range. Likely that the Browns are all but guaranteed to move on from Kareem Hunt, and it's not a surprise.
Yeah, I think we all understand the short shelf life of running backs. It's kind of why I said, throughout the draft cycle that getting another running back I thought was an underrated need that this team had, because I know you had Nick Chubb. Obviously, he's one of the best running backs in football, but, no matter how good a running back is in the NFL, considering the 17-game schedule, considering how physical teams are, you can't have one running back. You got to have another. And there's a lot of, potential with Jerome Ford. He looked great in the preseason, got some opportunities. I really like we could bring in Lease as a kick returner. But he's still kind of an unproven commodity. And, yeah, I know I say drafting another guy brings another unproven commodity, but, you trust that this is a running back class that has some good depth, particularly rounds 3 through 5. I've talked before just how versatile these guys are, that there's a lot of smaller pass-catching backs, and that's what I think the Browns need to be looking at in this draft as far as addressing that position. But I think it's pretty clear when you watch last year that Kareem Hunt just didn't quite have the normal juice that you type of see him play with. He didn't quite look as fast as we've seen before. And I think that's kind of, that kind of plays on to free agency kind of as to why he's still available right now.
All right. This is also a new guy that the Browns have added, Elijah Moore. Some speed, some quickness, wide receiver position. Take a look. He posts some of his workouts, and I bet you Deshaun Watson is smiling watching that. Some quickness, some good cutting, and a guy that the Browns will figure out a way to get the ball in his hands, Tim.
Yeah, I'm just watching this video. It's just incredible the quick transitions he's making. There's very little loss of speed, and if he loses any of it, he picks it up pretty quickly. That's the kind of athleticism that, made him a guy that I thought could have been a first-round pick 2 years ago, a guy that I thought the Browns could have taken with their first-round pick. Obviously, taking Greg Newsome worked out, but now, they get a second chance with Elijah Moore, and I think he's that missing element that the passing game just didn't have a year ago. You have good, solid receivers. Amari Cooper's a solid number 1. Donovan Peoples-Jones a solid 2, with the potential to still be a really good number 2 receiver, kind of really being that, I don't know if he's ever going to be a true number 1, but maybe he's at a position in some point in his career where he's kind of flirting with that distinction. But I think Elijah Moore's got a chance to be a real X factor. This receiving core just doesn't have this kind of speed, and when you look at what the Browns have done to receivers since Deshaun Watson's come in, since they, even pursued Deshaun Watson, they've tried to go after guys who are really good at separating. Amari Cooper is good as there is at separating. David Bell, he's very quick and he's a really good route runner. Elijah Moore, he's fast, but he's also quick. You see the quick change of direction. Those are things you need to create separation and coverage. And now there's all of a sudden three guys in that receiving group who have the ability to break off, routes in certain situations quickly and separate more easily, especially when you get into those situations where Deshaun Watson's going to freelance.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, take a look at some draft prospects that could interest the Browns. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Great Lakes Collectors Convention, presented by Greenie Sports Cards, takes over the Fieldhouse in Independence, Ohio, where the passions of sports fans, collectors, and sports talk enthusiasts collide. 50,000 square feet of ball card bliss. Hundreds of display tables. Card Shop Live Theater with interactive appearances from the region's most notable sports media. Great cards, great location, great show. Tickets on sale now at GreenieSportsCards.com.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
A lot of people say that Nick Chubb doesn't really run well in the gun, but, you know, watching the 2019 Browns, even though that offense was not good, Nick Chubb was really, he had some ups, he had some downs. I think there's some things that Kevin and Stump Mitchell are going to have to work out, especially if they're trying to run in the gun, especially with Deshaun and Nick Chubb in the backfield. But I think the gun is going to help Nick Chubb a lot, because I noticed that when we had Odell, Jarvis, and other wide receivers, everybody was spread out, and defenses were almost like daring us to run, because around that time we could not run the ball. So I think now defenses are going to really be keen in to stopping the pass first versus the run, which I think is going to help us in the long run.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Tim, the biggest adjustments, the offensive line is going to have to block a little differently. But they'll figure it out. And Nick Chubb's, look, it's not like running out of the shotgun makes him not one of the best running backs in the NFL, but it is a little different.
Yeah, it's different because you don't get that running start, you know, when you get the football. You're kind of going, you kind of have to accelerate pretty quickly once you get the ball out of the shotgun. So it is a little different in that regard. And when it comes to, you know, the O-line changing up, you know, how they block, I feel like with the Browns, you can trust Bill Callahan because he's one of the better offensive line coaches in football to kind of figure out, you know, how to get that going. But I do think that there's a really good point there about, you know, putting Nick Chubb in the shotgun more and letting him run more, because if you're in the shotgun, I mean, that's you typically maybe got 11 personnel, maybe four receivers, and then Nick Chubb, and then all of a sudden, you know, when you have those multiple receivers out there, especially with the upgrades the Browns made, bringing in Elijah Moore, you know, Marquise Goodwin out there for some, you know, depth and speed, you know, in that rotation. All of a sudden, especially with Deshaun Watson, you know, defenses have to back off a little bit. They can't just stack the box like you saw at the beginning of last season when Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback, and they kind of had to lean on Nick Chubb in the run game far more than they'll necessarily have to with Deshaun Watson. So Nick Chubb should see fewer boxes of more than 7 guys. And the other thing is, if you're spreading these guys out, if you're spreading the defenses out, typically they're going to play smaller guys. You're going to see more corners. You're going to see more safeties out there. And we know Nick Chubb's a hard enough guy to tackle as it is, but you get him a chance against guys who are smaller than him that are going to try to tackle him. He's got a chance probably for some more big plays potentially.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, good luck with that. If you want to try to tackle him with a safety, I like Nick Chubb in that matchup most of the time. Along the lines of drafts, so 5 edge rushers the Browns should be tracking as they approach the draft. This from Dog Pound Daily. Number 5. Carl Brooks from Bowling Green. Number 4, Mike Morris from Michigan. Number 3, Nick Hampton, Appalachian State. Number 2, a guy we've talked about with you a number of times, Nick Herbig from Wisconsin. And number 1, Isaiah McGuire. So let's go through a couple of those. When you look at those, Tim, who are guys that you think make a lot of sense there for the Browns?
I think those top 2 make the most sense. I would probably flip Herbig and McGuire a little bit, just because I feel like, you know, Herbig, I think, is a guy who's immediately ready to, you know, have a much bigger impact in the pass rush game. I talked last time I was on about how, you know, the 240 pounds doesn't scare me at all, really, because, you know, in fact the Browns would go to the Y9, size is not going to necessarily be as much of a prerequisite, I guess you could say, for that position. You'd be looking more at guys who could bend the edge, kind of win with speed, and I think that's where Nick Herbig's game is. And you look at the massive production he has, I think that's a huge positive in his in his resume out there is, he's produced so well. I feel like, when it comes to pass rushers, you can't just have traits. You also have had to produce at some point to show that you have an ability to prove you've had an ability to get to the quarterback and finish those sacks, in addition to the traits that you're looking for, at that position. So that's something I really like when it comes to Nick Herbig, is he has that production, and he's also been able to just, perform very well in those pass rush situations. And the other guy, Isaiah McGuire, we did a mock. I was on the Orange Brown Talk podcast with Dan Lobby and Lance Riesland Friday. This was a guy we had, as an option late in the third round for the Browns, and this is another guy who's solid production. Looking at his numbers right now, 13.5 sacks in his last 2 seasons, 27 tackles for loss in that same time frame. Very quick first step, a 10-yard split of 1.59 seconds. So you're talking a guy who can get off the line of scrimmage very quickly, which is another thing you want out of that Y9. Is if you may not necessarily need bend, but if you got speed to kind of, create pressure where the offensive tackle thing, he's got to go really far out to try and get, to chip the defensive end and make sure he doesn't get to the quarterback. That's almost as good. Now, McGuire's got some refinement to do as far as, how to really maximize what he has, but there's a lot of good tools there. And, when you're productive in the SEC, obviously going up against those great offensive linemen in the SEC, I mean, some of the best linemen do come from that conference, as much as people, here in Ohio maybe don't necessarily want to hear that. That's just the reality. Is that just where some of the best physical football is played? And if you produce there, it shows you a player who's capable of making some big things happen. So McGuire is a guy I would look for if the Browns don't go for Nick Herbig.
All right, Tom, and Andrew Berry does like guys from the SEC. We've seen that. All right, this is a Browns mock draft. Pete Smith, Sports Illustrated, did this one. So at 74, he has them going cornerback. DJ Turner from Michigan. You see 10-yard split, 147, vertical, 38.5, 27 solo tackles, 10 passes deflected, 1 pick. A season ago, you see the 40, 4.26, so this guy can fly. Then, going at 98, a guy that we've talked about, we just got done talking about. He's got him taking McGuire from Missouri. The 3-cone there is impressive. The vertical for a 268-pound guy is pretty impressive as well. The 10-yard split, something you like, and you talked about the production at 7.5 yards, or 7.5 sacks rather, a season ago. So we talked about McGuire. Let's talk a little bit about Turner. Never can say never as far as cornerback goes. Browns have a lot of pretty good ones. Andrew Berry has shown that he can identify guys that can play at this level.
Yeah, I mean, I think he caught everybody off guard last year when he took Martin Emerson, with that first pick. I would be even more surprised if he did it again, just because, this is not meant to be a knock to DJ Turner. I think he's an excellent prospect. He's, I mentioned, in that podcast I talked about as well, looking back at the Ohio State Michigan game, he was one of the best players on the field in that game. Just talented corner. Like you said, you can't have too many of those, but I feel like if you're taking DJ Turner, if you're the Browns, one of those 3 guys has to go, because you can have a rotation of them. Yeah, you can't have enough corners, but at some point, you can only put 11 guys on the field at a time. So, at some point you gotta consider what you have in there, and that's why I have reservations taking DJ Turner unless something were to happen to one of the other 3 corners that the Browns have. So that's kind of where I have my concerns with that. I'd be looking for an edge or defensive tackle there, possibly a receiver more so than a corner. But again, with Andrew Berry, we know, as a former defensive back, he loves his corners. So it's always never say never when it comes to the draft. But like I said before, I feel like I would be way more surprised now if it was a corner than I was a year ago when it was Emerson.
All right. In the 4th round, he has him taking a wide receiver that, we talked about that. Jonathan Mingo. This is a guy, and you see the age, kind of has been flying up draft boards, according to Peter Schrager from the NFL Network. You see the 40 time, 10-yard split is good as well. 22 reps on the bench press. Guy's a little bigger, 6'1", 220. Ole Miss has produced some physical wide receivers, was hurt as a junior. And then the other pick in round 4, Smith has him going offensive line. And you see a big-bodied guy, 22, 6'6", 318. The bench is pretty good. The shuttle's not bad for a big offensive lineman. 10-yard split at 1.8, pretty good as well. Mingo and Celavari, both of those guys in the 4th round, yeah, I'll take them if they're there.
Yeah, I've looked, I've always said before that when you talk about when you talk about drafting, no matter how good your offensive line is, I always feel like you need to get one. And I think Nick Solidaveri, he's a guy that I got to do a little more work on now that he's kind of, starting to pop up, earlier and earlier in day 3. And this is a guy, like, looking at him initially, got a good build for the position. I mean, 6'6", 318 pounds. He moves well, which I think, with the zone blocking scheme, you need guys like that who can move. You just need that mobility, and 34 starts in his career at right tackle. So plenty of experience. Experience and mobility, I think, are 2 big things you want an offensive lineman. And the question, I guess, would he eventually be the swing tackle if you don't believe James Hudson can develop anything else, or are you kind of developing him to be maybe a starter down the road? Maybe are you looking for him to be, a guard potentially, in case they decide to move on from Wyatt Teller after this coming season. So he's a talented player that I feel like can play multiple positions and certainly can, take care of, kind of safeguard the future a little bit potentially for the offensive line. And when it comes to Jonathan Mingo, I kind of saw some of those reports saying, all of a sudden, he's getting some 2nd-round buzz. And I think when you look at, his profile, it's easy to understand why. I mean, he's almost 6'2", 220 pounds, had an amazing NFL combine, still a little raw as a receiver. I think didn't have quite the production you would expect or you would kind of hope to have. But, I think that's just kind of the knock on him is just, he didn't quite produce as well as he is. But when you look at, just his traits, those are phenomenal. I talked before about how he's got plenty of versatility. He played more than a third of his snaps last season in the slot, which I think is important because, in this receiving core for the Browns, you might need to put him inside and you might be able to move him outside to kind of keep rotating guys in and out in certain situations. And you talked about that, Ole Miss receiver factory, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf. It's amazing those 2 guys came out in the same draft. I think, 10, 12 picks apart. And, both guys they're 2 of the best receivers in the NFL. And, of course, the Browns already have a Ole Miss receiver in their room in Elijah Moore. So I think it'd be kind of fun, I think, for the Browns to bring Jonathan Mingo back, a little bit of a reunion with him and Elijah Moore, and kind of gives them a built-in mentor to help them adjust to the pro game. So I think that would be an interesting fit.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Plus, one of the Browns receivers, a dark horse to lead the league in receiving yards. We'll talk about that. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Everybody keeps on talking about how we're going to have the Eagles offense and we're going to be inspired by that. I was really, really taken aback when they were just getting weapons for Deshaun, because this is exactly what the Chiefs did last offseason, and it paid off in the end. And I think that they're realizing that they need more weapons. Unfortunately, they can't rely on Anthony Schwartz to see if he's the answer, or even though David Bell just got on the team just last year, they can't wait on him too. So they need results right now. And I think Kevin, he might implement some things from the Eagles and from, the Chiefs, but this will be the Browns offense. It'll be explosive, and we could also run downhill. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, there's nothing new in the NFL or football, so you bring things together and you make them your own. And if you take it from the Eagles and you take it from the Chiefs and you have success, it becomes the Browns.
I mean, the NFL is essentially a copycat league. If you do something well, other teams are going to look at what you did and be like, hey, maybe we can do that too. So, I mean, if you're looking at the Chiefs and the Eagles, obviously, arguably the 2 best offenses in football last season, there's plenty of good reason to go after, trying to do some of the things they like to do. And, Caller was talking about, trying to build an offense similar to what the Chiefs had in terms of, just they had a bunch of guys out there, receiver, just multiple guys, at the position they could rotate in and out instead of having Tyreek Hill, which obviously you'd want to have Tyreek Hill because he's as good a receiver as we've seen in the NFL in quite a little bit because he's so explosive. But if you can't have him, you might as well have 3 or 4 guys who are all solid, all guys who can come into the game and do their job. And we saw in the AFC Championship game, they were running out of guys. They had multiple receivers of theirs get injured. And, because they had brought so many guys in that they were able to have just enough to, beat the Bengals. And then they had enough to get the job done in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. So no reason they can't borrow things from both teams.
All right, this is kind of interesting. So dark horse candidates to lead major offensive categories in 2023. This is from the Bleacher Report. Most receiving yards. Number 1, they go Chris Olave. Number 2, Calvin Ridley. And number 3, a dark horse, Amari Cooper of the Browns. Cooper was solid in his first season in Cleveland, 78 passes for 1,160 yards, 9 touchdowns. If Deshaun Watson takes a step forward in his second season in Cleveland, Cooper should be one of the biggest beneficiaries of that improvement. The other thing that's important to remember is Jacoby Brissett played really well, but he was the quarterback for 11 games, and nothing against Jacoby Brissett. Nobody's going to confuse Jacoby Brissett's ability to throw the ball with Deshaun Watson's.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I mean, again, if you're talking Deshaun Watson, obviously he's this full-time starter now. You would have to imagine the Browns are going to lean more towards the passing game, as much as you have Nick Chubb and this offensive line, which is geared to run the football, you win games in the NFL by throwing the ball, as good, if not better than anybody. And if you're one of the elite passing teams, you're going to have the most success. So no reason to think that they're not going to throw a lot. And what you saw out of Amari Cooper a year ago is even though, Jacoby Brissett, not really a full-time starting quarterback, kind of a guy who can be a spot starter. The fact that Cooper put up so many good performances with Jacoby Brissett as quarterback tells me, that Cooper's just a guy who can produce no matter who's the quarterback. He's just that kind of receiver. Like I said before, he separates extremely well. And the fact that he gets open makes him a great receiver for a quarterback to throw to. You saw so many times how he was able to shake free from coverage and even make some good contesting catches. It's proof that he's a legitimate number 1 receiver in the NFL. So with more opportunities, you would imagine, with more passes, you would expect Cooper might get some more opportunities. And with Deshaun Watson having a bigger arm than Jacoby Brissett, you would imagine more opportunities for those big shot plays that you really didn't see a lot of out of the Browns last season.
All right, so we know where Odell Beckham Jr. is going to play next year. He is headed to the Ravens, signing a 1-year contract worth as much as $18 million. Mike Greenberg, Jeremy Fowler on OBJ and Lamar Jackson playing together. This is from Get Up.
Lamar Jackson posted this image of the two of them, meaning Lamar and OBJ talking on FaceTime. You see the caption, you see the lightning bolts on the right. This is a lot of enthusiasm from Lamar Jackson, who, of course, as we speak, is a Raven in name only. OBJ could become, I want to say this out loud as I get to it, OBJ could become the first Pro Bowl receiver in Ravens franchise history. They have had players who made it as kick returners who were wide receivers, but they've never had a primary receiver make the Pro Bowl in the entire time since they moved there from Cleveland. So let me start with my insider extraordinaire. How did this happen yesterday?
Well, the Ravens just outbid everybody, Greeny. I was told that they sensed the urgency over the weekend because Odell Beckham was set to come to New Jersey today to meet with the Jets and take a physical and possibly sign to play with Aaron Rodgers. There was mutual interest. Ravens jumped in with a huge contract. They essentially said, hey, we're locking this up right now. They've been looking at wide receivers for a while, trade market, everything. They knew with new offensive coordinator Todd Monken and possibly Lamar Jackson that maybe this will help out. They had to get weapons on the outside.
And Tim, Lamar Jackson helped recruit OBJ there. I find it kind of ironic, though, that they don't want to guarantee, how many ever millions to Lamar Jackson. They're guaranteeing OBJ, who hasn't played a full season in 2 years, $15 million. That doesn't add up.
Yeah, as soon as I saw the number, I'm like, they could pay $18 million, up to $18 million for Odell Beckham, yet they can't pay Lamar Jackson, close to Deshaun Watson money, or they don't want to pay just that kind of money. It's kind of confusing, I guess, in that way. But I to me, it sounds like it's a situation, where they were pointing it out and Get Up, that Baltimore has never had a Pro Bowl receiver in its history, and that's kind of shocking considering, how great of a, talent evaluator that Ozzie Newsome was for the entire time as general manager. That was the one position they could just never get right, as far as drafting guys. So in a way, I feel like this is a contract where they're kind of paying the tax for that, is that they didn't have that elite receiver. And, when you get really desperate, you're going to have to pay that extra money. And it's clear that, that, again, like you said, it's a lot of money for a guy who didn't even play last season. He's had a full year plus to recover from the torn ACL that he had in the Super Bowl. It's the second one that he's had in the last few years. So who knows what he's going to look like in 2023, and who even knows if Lamar Jackson is going to be the quarterback in 2023. But to me, this raises a few questions as far as, again, like I said, why this money for Odell when you could have saved some money and ensured that you would have gotten Lamar Jackson? Because I mean, the market for him, it's slow right now, and really there's no traction as far as, if he's going to stay for sure in Baltimore, if they're going to do the deal for him, or if they're it's waiting for somebody else maybe to, present a deal that he could agree to. So Baltimore going to turn around and say, yes, we'll do it. So, I mean, it's just a long way. It's been a long process, and I don't know if it's going to end anytime soon. Yeah, and I get it. So they're paying, $15 million guaranteed for Odell. It's probably similar to the Browns paying the guaranteed for Deshaun. When you don't have something, you're looking to get it any way you can. Tim Bielik, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Great stuff. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day. All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out. Pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Some news from the Guardians as well, and it's concerning. Now 40% of the starting rotation is on the injured list. Aaron Savali put on the injured list with a strained oblique muscle. Tristan McKenzie goes to the 60-day injured list. He can return as soon as May 29th. The reason they needed to do that, they had to open up a spot on the 40-man roster for Peyton Battenfield. Battenfield, 25 years old, was acquired in the Jordan Luplow trade with Tampa Bay in 2021. 0-1, 3.60 ERA at AAA this year. Last year spent the entire season with the Columbus Clippers in AAA. It was 8-6, a 3.63 earned run average in 28 starts. He is scheduled to make his major league debut Wednesday against the New York Yankees over at Progressive Field. Peyton Battenfield brought up with the injury to Aaron Savali. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers getting ready for a first-round playoff series with the Knicks, and the Cavs have home court advantage. Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead, stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
Sports4CLE continues. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers getting ready for a playoff series where they will have home court advantage. It'll get underway Saturday at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Let's take a look, though. Cavs finished the regular season 51-31, best mark since 2016-2017 when they had the same record. Cavs also had their most home wins since 2016-2017 with 31. Let's welcome in Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Chris, you saw it. Kind of put it in perspective. How good of a year was this, given just the young guys and everything that was trying to be figured out at once?
Well, it remains to be seen, Dave, because I think what they do in the first round series against New York is going to determine just how successful a year this is. But if we're talking about just in the regular season, look, 50-plus wins in a loaded Eastern Conference. This is as good as the Eastern Conference has been in at least a decade, maybe even longer. And for them to be right there with Boston, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia and have home court advantage and be the fourth seed in the Eastern Conference, I think it's something that they should celebrate. There were a lot of individual accomplishments throughout the course of the regular season. There were a lot of team accomplishments throughout the course of the regular season. And being able to win 50-plus games and show that you can have success without LeBron James and show that you can do it a different kind of way with defense as opposed to offense in today's modern era where offense has exploded, I do believe that the Cavs deserve a lot of credit for what they've accomplished to this point.
Fair enough. All right, let's take a look at this. Donovan Mitchell, single season marks. This is from the Cavs as well. So 28.3 points per game, fifth highest in Cavs history. 245 three-point field goals made, most in Cavs history. 13 40-point games, most in Cavs history. 31 30-point games, seventh most in Cavs history. 71 points in a game, most in Cavs history. 58 multi-three-point field goal games, most in Cavs history. Take a listen to Brian Windhorst from ESPN's NBA Cross Court on the Donovan Mitchell trade.
Donovan Mitchell gives the Cavs a fighting chance in any playoff game and any playoff series. They're definitely going to have some issues building the rest of this roster out because trading away all of those picks and other assets has made it more difficult. But they don't regret this trade for 1 second. And Donovan Mitchell is going to be an all-NBA player this year and one of the best returns on an investment the Cavs have made in their team history.
And the reason I play that is I agree wholeheartedly with it. You make that trade 10 out of 10 times, and you see if you get the Jazz to do it an 11th time if you can.
And I think Brian brings up the key point there. The Cavs were in a good place, right? At the time that they decided to trade for Donovan Mitchell, they were coming off a 44-win season. They advanced to the play-in tournament, lost both games, Brooklyn and Atlanta. But they felt good about what they had, Dave, and they should have felt good about what they had. If they didn't get hit with untimely injuries down the stretch, completely ravaged by injuries down the stretch, they would have been a playoff team last year. So this wasn't an organization that needed to act out of desperation to go get a player like this. You know what I mean? Like, they were in a good spot. They felt good about where they could go in the future. They felt like they were going to get better into the future. But the difference is Donovan raises their ceiling. Donovan has made them believe in a different kind of way. Donovan does give them a fighting chance in any series, whether it's against New York, against Milwaukee, against Boston. Because when you have a dude like that on your side that's capable of doing those kinds of things and even elevating his game to an MVP level in the postseason, something that we've seen in the past, in a 7-game series, that kind of guy can shift that series. So that's the big key to Donovan, is that he has raised the Cavs ceiling. And instead of just, being a middle-of-the-pack Eastern Conference team that would get to the playoffs probably with the core that they had coming back, they trade for Donovan, and now they belong in a different tier. Now they belong in a different conversation. And now they have a fighting chance to win their first playoff series without LeBron James in 30 years.
Yep. The other thing is, and this is really interesting, take a look. Only 3 teams finished the season ranked in the top 10 for offensive rating and defensive rating. Celtics were number 2 in offense, number 3 in defense. Cavs, number 8 in offense, number 1 in defense. 76ers, number 4 in offensive rating, number 9 in defensive rating. Those are guys that you expect to be in the mix to win the Eastern Conference along with the Milwaukee Bucks. And strictly by the numbers, the Cavs deserve to be in that conversation.
Poor Memphis. They missed by 0.2 points per 100 possessions on the offensive end because they were passed on the last game of the regular season. But they would have been the 4th team, top 10 in offense and defense, until they decided to go the other direction in the finale. But you're right. Like, that's the thing about the Cavs, right? And I think that's one of the things that's really hard to determine in terms of how far they can go in this postseason run, because there are a lot of markers that you would look at, Dave, that tell you that is a contending team. If you just did a blind resume and you looked at offensive rating, defensive rating, net rating, you looked at point differential, you looked at how many double-digit wins the team has, how many double-digit losses the team doesn't have, like all those things point to the Cavs being a legitimate contender. But there is a variable out here that I just don't know how to quantify, right? Like, beyond Donovan Mitchell, Danny Green, Robin Lopez, Raul Neto, not many of these guys know what's coming here in the postseason. Game 1, Saturday night, at home against the Knicks. They haven't been there. Darius hasn't been there. Evan hasn't been there. Isaac Okoro hasn't been there. Dean Wade hasn't been there. Ricky Rubio has only played in 2 playoff series his entire career. And yes, he's got a bunch of international experience. And yes, he played for the Spanish national team. But if you go up and down the list, there just aren't a lot of guys where we can look at them and say, you know what? In a 7-game series, when it matters the most, the lights are the brightest, we know exactly how they're going to respond to that. We think we know about Darius, right? We think he's going to handle the moment. He's an all-star caliber player. He's been waiting for this his entire career. He's got the makeup, physically and mentally, to handle a playoff environment, but we just don't know. That's a variable that we just don't know. They haven't been through these things. They haven't seen these things. They haven't felt these things. And I think it might take a couple of games for these guys to really understand what it's going to take to play winning basketball in a playoff environment. Whereas if you look at the Knicks, and if you look at the Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks and the Philadelphia 76ers, you don't have those same questions about the top level players that the Cavs are relying on the most. Even Jared Allen has only played 9 playoff games in his entire career. Karis LeVert, 9 playoff games in his entire career. So the guys that the Cavs are expecting the most from, there is a level of uncertainty attached to them, unless we're talking about Donovan Mitchell, which is why Donovan is going to have to shoulder a lot of pressure in this first round playoff series against the Knicks.
Yeah, it's a fair concern, and it's the human element, which will make it even that much more fun to watch as it unfolds. Chris Fedor and I.
But if we just go, Dave, if we just go by what every team has accomplished in the regular season, there's nobody that should discount the Cavs as a contender, because all of their metrics that point to them and whether or not they do belong in that conversation, they would say, yes, they have been one of the best teams in the NBA during the regular season.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. It comes down to that whole human thing. How are you going to handle the spotlight? And you would think this team will be able to handle it. We'll find out. The lights are going to be bright. And think about this. It's against New York. You handle that, and then all of a sudden, the whole world will be talking, about it. If the Cavs come out and play well against the Knicks, think about the national spotlight that will be shining on them.
Right. The other thing is, if they find a way against the Knicks, think about the confidence that builds, right? Think about the knowledge that they gain in that particular series, and then they're better off to face off against a Milwaukee team with more knowledge, with more experience, and maybe they have a better chance in round 2 against a team like Milwaukee because of everything that they go through in the first round series against New York. Again, we're not going to get ahead of ourselves because the Knicks are a very formidable opponent, and Jalen Brunson has been there, done that on the biggest stage, and Julius Randle has had success on the biggest stage, and Tom Thibodeau has made life hell for some of the NBA's best players as a defensive-minded coach on the biggest stage. So this is going to be a battle for the Cavs, but they're going to be better off if they're going to upset a team like Milwaukee in round 2. They're going to be better off because of the experience and the knowledge that they gain in round 1.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. Chris Fedor and I are going to take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll hear from JB Bickerstaff talking about that Knicks series. Take a look at some of the matchups. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
The Great Lakes Collectors Convention, presented by Greeny Sports Cards, takes over the Fieldhouse in Independence, Ohio, where the passions of sports fans, collectors, and sports talk enthusiasts collide. 50,000 square feet of ball card bliss. Hundreds of display tables. Card Shop Live Theater with interactive appearances from the region's most notable sports media. Great cards, great location, great show. Tickets on sale now at greenysportscards.com.
We continue talking Cavs with Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Cavs have home court advantage, Game 1, Saturday, 6 o'clock, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. JB Bickerstaff likes what he has in this young group.
I'm confident in our group, period. I believe when we're at our best, we're a tough out for anybody. We need to make sure, we're aware and tighten up the details in our execution and all those things. And, again, it's going to be a new test for us. We have guys that are going to be in their first playoff series. So, it's never going to come easy, but I have a lot of confidence in our group.
So, Chris, it's been an 82-game cram session for what comes up in the next 4 to 7 games.
I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? I mean, as good as they've been in the regular season and all the numbers that we referenced that point to them being a contender, JB Bickerstaff, the players, they'll all admit that the playoffs are a completely different animal. It's a series now. It's all about exploiting weaknesses and highlighting strengths and finding mismatches. It's all about how fast can you counter what they're going to throw at you. How quick can you make adjustments within a game and within a series? The one thing that I will say, Dave, is that the Cavs have had a very beneficial end of season situation for them, right? Because they banked some wins and because they created some distance on the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets for the 4th spot in the Eastern Conference, even before the regular season ended, before they played against Orlando and locked up the 4th seed in home court advantage, there was like a 93% chance of them finishing with the 4th seed. And then there was like a 93% chance that the Knicks were going to finish in the 5th seed. So even before the season wrapped up, the Cavs were preparing for the New York Knicks. They were doing film breakdowns. They were doing analytical studies. They were doing video clips. They were doing scouting report, tendencies, all that kind of stuff. And now with like a week off before playing the opener on Saturday, they're going to be able to dig more into the Knicks. So the preparation time that the Cavs have gotten because of the way that the schedule lined up, because of the way that the standings were, they got a head start on prepping for New York. So they're going to be ready. The question is, can they go out and execute?
Yeah, and that's a fair question. This is also really interesting. So this comes from Ben Axelrod. Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo, national NBA guys, both pick Evan Mobley as their defensive player of the year. And I certainly think he should be in the conversation. And I think as the Cavs get into the spotlight a little bit more, he's going to be more and more in that conversation.
Can we add another name? Because Chris Fedor picked Evan Mobley as Defensive Player of the Year too.
And you know,
our ballots were due today at 6:00 p.m. And I picked Evan Mobley as Defensive Player of the Year. I picked Evan Mobley as first team all defense. And look, I get an argument for Brook Lopez. I get the argument for Draymond Green if you want to make it. I get the argument for Jaren Jackson Jr. as well. I just felt like in my position, watching Evan on a nightly basis, I feel like I see the impact, possession to possession, night to night, that he makes that doesn't always show up in the stat sheet. And I think that's what Defensive Player of the Year should be all about. It should be about impact. It should be about value to your defense. The Cavs are the #1 defense in the NBA, in large part because everything that Evan Mobley can do. Like, he can guard on the perimeter. He can protect the rim. He can guard 1 through 5. He has nearly as many contested shots at the rim as he does out at the 3-point line. Like, that is unicorn level stuff that you don't see from every single defender. Brook Lopez can't guard out on the perimeter.
Yep.
Right? Like, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a great defensive player. There's no doubt about it. But I just feel like because of the Cavs being the #1 defense, because Evan is #1 in defensive win shares, because he's #1 in ESPN real plus minus, and because they function defensively the way that they do, in large part because of him and his versatility, I think that should be rewarded.
I agree with you. And I think if more people saw him night in, night out, he'd have more votes as the defensive player of the year. All right,
if he got more blocks per game and more steals per game and those usual counting numbers that a lot of people look at, maybe he would get more love. But again, his possession-to-possession impact, I don't know that anybody has a greater one.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you watch the Cavs closely, he makes a difference on the defensive end of the court. All right, before we go to break, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Calling about Tom Thibodeau's strategy. I've been sleeping on Knicks news. Their bench is all two-way players, and they plan on packing the paint so that take away the driving lanes and trying to frustrate Garland. And it's more difficult to do it with Mitchell because he's a more bulky kind of guy. But that's their plan. And they close out quick on the three since we don't have quicker release threes. Only Jetty has that ability to hit the three quick. So that's their plan. And hopefully this information can be used and to help us defeat the Knicks. Go Cavs.
Chris, as always, we appreciate the voicemails. Tom Thibodeau's a really good defensive coach. So, yeah, they're going to pack it in and say beat us from the outside. Let's see how that works.
They're also going to throw things at Darius, Dave, that he's never seen before. He's going to get a level of attention, a level of pressure, a level of focus that he's never seen before. And it's going to be up to him to handle it the right way. He's going to see blitzes. He's going to see multiple defenders. And I think part of that, and this is no offense to Darius, it's just he hasn't accomplished as much in his career as Donovan Mitchell. He certainly hasn't accomplished anything in the postseason to this point in his career. So it's easier to frustrate him, right? It's easier to potentially rattle him than it is Donovan. Donovan has, you can't say that somebody has seen it all, right? Because then all of a sudden the NBA throws something at you that's new and that's different. But Donovan has seen a lot. So he knows how to combat some of the coverages and some of the schemes that Tom Thibodeau could devise. Darius hasn't been through that same thing. So it's going to be up to him to handle those blitzes and those traps. It's going to be up to him to get off of the ball to see if maybe that can change some things up for his attack on the offensive end. It's going to be up to him to handle that pressure and not turn the basketball over and not be flippant with the basketball and protect possessions, value the rock, all those different things. And it's going to be tougher for him to do that because of the attention that he's going to see from New York's defense.
Yeah, that's all fair. And those are going to be, if he's able to handle that, the Knicks are in trouble because this offense will run really effectively if he handles what Tom Thibodeau has in store for him. Chris Fedor and I are going to take one more time out. We continue talking about this matchup coming up, some things that are keys to the Cavs-Knicks series. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Cavs, getting ready for a first-round series against the New York Knicks. This is from the Bleacher Report. One thing holding back every Eastern Conference team. For the Cavs, they say role players shooting. Cavaliers have an unbelievable four-man core, but their playoff hopes will hinge on the shooting of that fifth player on the court. We're talking about guys like Isaac Okoro, Chetty Osman, Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens. I think you can throw Karis LeVert, Danny Green into those conversations And Chris, I think that is a fair concern and a fair point as to what will be a key in this series.
Look at last year's play-in tournament. Look at what Brooklyn did. Brooklyn used its worst defender, Seth Curry, who was on a bum ankle, by the way, that required surgery in the offseason, to guard Isaac Okoro. And guard is a loose term because most of the time Seth was about 9 to 10 feet away from him, trying to clog the paint so that Darius didn't have the driving lanes and Karis LeVert didn't have the driving lanes and things like that. And then in that first play-in tournament game against Brooklyn, Isaac Okoro got 3 straight corner threes and he bricked them all. He got yanked out of the game and he only played 13 minutes and he didn't start the next game against the Atlanta Hawks because the Cavs went with a different starting lineup, putting Karis LeVert in there because they trusted him more offensively and they felt like he would give them enough defensively to offset what they were losing by taking Isaac off the court. So yeah, that's obviously something that teams are going to focus in on, and they're going to, for all of the times that teams have left Isaac open, teams become more drastic at doing that in the postseason. Remember what teams have done against Lou Dort of the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? Remember what teams did in the past against Tony Allen of the Memphis Grizzlies. Heck, teams went under screens against LeBron James and Dwayne Wade because they would dare those guys to shoot from the outside. So yeah, there's no doubt that Isaac's going to have to be respectable on the offensive end to earn his minutes. Same thing with Dean Wade, Danny Green, Jetty Osman, anybody else that plays that particular position, because one of the goals that the Cavs are going to have to achieve here in this 7-game series against the Knicks is finding a way to try and make it easier on Darius and Donovan, try and create more space for those guys. And it can be hard because Evan Mobley is not somebody who plays out on the perimeter offensively. He doesn't have that 3-point game, and Jared Allen is somebody who's going to play inside the paint as well. So they've got to find a way to create more space for Darius and Donovan. And one of the ways to do that is to knock down threes. And that comes down to those guys that you mentioned, the others, if you would.
So one guy that does have a lot of playoff experience is Danny Green, has played on 3 different championship teams. He talked about the importance of home court advantage in the playoffs, as well as what he's telling teammates about the playoffs.
Just embrace the moment. Don't think too much into it. Have fun, play basketball. At the end of the day, it is a basketball game, and guys play their best basketball when they're having fun. But every possession matters. Everybody's going to continue to say it over and over. You'll see that any play can determine or change a series or change a game, and every game, every possession matters. So you can't go in lackadaisical, can't go in missing assignments. You got to be locked in, know your matchups, know your personnel, know who you're guarding, know how we want to execute our principles, and go out there and play and have fun. Don't be scared of the moment. Shoot the ball when you're open and knock down shots like they've been doing all year. You're in your own building, your home building. That gives you a little more adrenaline, a little more excitement to be able to make shots or make those extra plays, especially when game's a game of runs. Basketball's a game of runs, especially in this league. So when that team goes on a run, if you're on the road, it's a lot harder to get out of that run. At home, it's a lot easier to turn around. It's a lot easier to get back into a game. It's a lot tougher on the road. So, so they earned it. They earned their rest days, and they got home court advantage. So hopefully we take advantage of it and protect home.
So, Chris, I know you've written an article. Do the Cavs have room for Danny Green in their playoff rotation?
David Bickerstaff says yes. I just don't see the pathway to it, Dave. Look, I think his role is going to be very similar to what it's been here in the regular season. Do the Cavs need some floor spacing and some shooting in certain moments? Then they're going to go with Danny Green. Do the Cavs need a spark off the bench offensively? Then they're going to go with Danny Green. Do the Cavs need somebody who's going to go out there and bang some threes because Jetty Osman is cold? Then they're going to go to Danny Green. Do they need somebody to change the pace and give them a little bit more veteran experience and some basketball know-how in the postseason situation? Then they're going to go to Danny Green. But the bottom line is Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen, they're all going to play around 40 minutes or more. Isaac Okoro, obviously, that's the position where the Cavs have some space to mix and match some guys depending on how Isaac plays throughout the course of the series. But I think the Cavs are going to give minutes to Karis LeVert, big minutes to Karis LeVert, especially if he plays the way that he did down the stretch of the season. I think they want to make room at some point for Ricky Rubio, believing that his steady hand, his veteran leadership, and his ability just to settle things down and run an offense is going to be important. So you just get into a numbers game. If the Cavs are going to rely on the top 7 guys that they relied on during the regular season, then there's really only one more spot in the playoff rotation. And I think it's going to be some combination of Cedi Osman, Danny Green, Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens, based on what the Cavs need on that particular night or in that particular situation. And I think just baked into his role on this team is a level of fluctuation where he may go a couple of games without getting any minutes or any shot attempts. And then maybe in like a game 6 or a game 7, the Cavs will dust him off and hope that he can capture some of that magic again. But he's a liability on the defensive end of the floor. He makes them play a little bit slower. For all the things that you like about him, the Cavs haven't been a great team with him on the court in games that have mattered down the stretch. And I just think there are more guys that have built-in faith and built-in trust from JB Bickerstaff at this point in time.
Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and insight. We'll be looking forward to more previews and knowledge as we get closer to Game 1 Saturday at 6. Chris, thanks so much, man.
You got it, Dave. Anytime, man. Should be a lot of fun.
All right, appreciate it. Chris Fedor, make sure you check him out. Great Cavs coverage as they're getting ready for a playoff series. Home court advantage against the Knicks in the first round. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.